into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hi guys, welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Welcome to Crime News Update. We're going to go straight to a kind of a promo from the BBC dealing with Nicola Bulley.
The nights were the hardest. The end of the day where it goes dark. Because in the morning, the hope would be strong. And then it used to go dark at like 4. It'd get to about 3 o'clock and I used to start panicking that I knew that it'd start going dark in an hour. So we had an hour to try and find her. And then obviously I'd have to go.
So I've got to say what I find quite ironic with that. I've obviously not watched the documentary. I'm not actually sure if it's shown yet. I think it shows on the 1st or 2nd of October. What I find quite ironic about that, it's kind of about his mental health. It's about him having a panic attack. It's about it getting dark and him getting anxious. And I'm not saying any of that to belittle him or to ridicule him or to undermine him. None of that. Just that it's about his mental health. And without having seen the documentary, I do wonder, do they talk much about Nicola Bulley's mental health? Do they talk sufficiently about Nicola Bulley's mental health? Have you guys voted in the poll? I think when I last saw it, most of you seem to believe that this is foul play, even though there's no investigation. So it's kind of like, well, I believe what YouTubers have said, that even though there's no, that, it's likely foul play. And what is there, a murderer walking around? But no one's investigating it, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. So let's have a look. At the moment, 40% say foul play, and 42% say an accident, and less than 20% say something else. So I'm going to share with you what I think. I think that probably many of you know me and know my channel, know what I think, but I am quite surprised at this result. It is kind of predictable that most people want to believe the more shocking thing, right? I mean, that is how YouTubers make their bread and butter, by shock value. And that's also what people choose to click on. I mean, what is more shocking, foul play or an accident? So, we had the same situation in the, thanks very much, Robbie Robin, I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. If you're a new subscriber and you one of the subscribers that became part of the 200,000 towards the end, I really appreciate that. If you've been here all along, good to have you here. I think you'll agree it's been quite an authentic journey, and the journey continues. But certainly in terms of that narrative, the foul play narrative, do you remember how the foul play narrative occurred in the Jay Slater case? I think most people, if we polled people now, most people would say, yeah, I think Jay Slater was murdered, even though that's not what the police think, and even though that's not what the evidence shows. No, well, that's what I believe. That's kind of the world we live in now. It's kind of make believe, like what you want to believe happened is what happened. Okay, well then that's, and you can follow what you believe on YouTube. There's always a YouTuber who's telling you what you believe, and often those are the more popular channels. But is that the truth? Is that what really happened? Because reality is often quite slippery. It's not what you want. It's simply what it is. Anyway, let's listen to a bit more from this this preview.
Girls, the first thing that they do when they come out of school was run over and say, "Have we found Mummy?"
Hello, good afternoon. I hope everybody's having a lovely Saturday. I just wanted to pop on and do a little video. So if I turn the video around now so I can show you.
Social media Nikki used it more than I did because she used to sell stuff.
So I must say this really surprised me. I've obviously watched this preview before, but it really surprised me that Nicola Bulley was also kind of a online, what do they call Shanann Watts? A media maven. Isn't that what they called her? Is the body shop selling body shop paraphernalia, is that multi-level marketing, or is that just selling stuff? Is it I must say I'm not really familiar with it. Let me just do a quick Google search. I don't think it is somehow. Is it MLM? Because I see it comes up here. Is the body shop an MLM? There's two arms, a standard retail model and an MLM model. So there is a MLM element to the body shop. So, yeah, I mean, that's the jury's out. What do you guys say? Anyway, the point is, you seem to have a similar situation in one little dimension here, where Nicola Bulley was on social media quite a lot, and she was also using it to as you know, to sell, right? And you kind of got to ask, how much fun is that? How enjoyable is that? How meaningful is that? Right? All of those things. And at the end of the day, beyond that conversation, you say, well, how happy was she? Because you can say exactly the same thing with Shanann Watts. And let's face it, one of the things we learned from the Watts case was that Shanann was always putting up a brave face. There's a really, I mean, certainly sticks in my mind, an image that Shanann sent to one of her friends in the middle of everything happening. And she said, wow, I'm so tired. I've been crying all week. Meanwhile, every post she would put on social media, she'd be saying how much energy she has and how wonderful her marriage is and how wonderful everything is. That creates incredible psychological strain on any person, where you've always got to put on a brave face and always got to be, smiling and sunny and all of that, no matter, even if you're dying inside, even if you're crying inside, that kind of strain can really work at you and can really, in a way, hurt you, because you can't show who you really are. You know, it starts to tear you apart kind of from the inside out. So I was quite surprised, because I didn't know about this dimension. I knew that, as far as I knew, that she sold property. She was a realtor, wasn't she? So anyway, this is something that the documentary certainly exposes.
Stuff, so she would do live videos.
So you've got your top layer, and then you have all these gorgeous products.
It wasn't a huge part of our lives, but yeah, when you experience something like this, you realize what a huge monster it can be, I guess. I was getting direct messages from people that I've never met. They don't know me, they don't know us, they don't know Nikki, they know nothing about us. Just messages like, you bastard, we know what you did, you know, you can't hide, Paul, that kind of stuff. There was some that I felt like replying to, but then if you reply to that, they'll just scream.
So again, he's talking here about his mental health, and again, I'm sure it's very valid. I'm sure it's very relevant. But my question is, what was her mental health like, right? And I'm going to deal with what they talk about in this article in a second. Let's just play a little bit more.
Screenshot your reply. That'll end up on social media. And so you're literally silenced. And you can't do anything about it.
As far as Nikki going missing and the mystery to it, I guess, it was just an accident. It doesn't always have to be something.
So there you've heard, I think that was her sister speaking, and her sister saying, it's an accident. Why does it need to be more than that? Again, let's just have a look at the poll. Foul play 41%, accident 39-40. Okay, make sure you vote if you haven't. And then something else, lagging way behind, less than about half the votes for the other two. Something else is at 20%. So, yeah, around about an equal split between foul play and accident. That is actually quite incredible that half of you guys think that it's one thing and the other half something else that's totally different. Like, was a crime committed here, yes or no? And half of you, in a way, when I look at this, I'm interpreting this as I don't know. It could be foul play, it could be an accident, or it could be something else. Right? Could be something else. Anyway, I'll share with you what I think a little bit later. Long Island Hillbilly, thanks very much for that. Risky Rocket says her own sister called a welfare check on her. Well said. Can I just ask the mods to pay attention to this sort of thing? We're not here to victimize the husband. We're not here to blame the husband. We're not here to attack the husband. We're not here to accuse the husband. So if you see this sort of thing in chat, just block the person, okay? I don't want to see any of this sort of thing here. We're trying to understand what happened to Nicola Bulley, not, what's the word, defame, slander, accuse somebody else, especially not her own family members. Robbie Robbins says, I put something else. Songbird says something else. By the way, just happy birthday to Chelsea. There you can see her on screen. I think it was your birthday on Sunday, so happy birthday to you. Okay, Charlie, who's actually Lisa, also said something else. Okay, so let's listen to a little bit more from this.
Something sinister linked to something that happens. Sometimes bad things just happen. Just wish it hadn't happened to us. We're just a normal.
So do you guys remember that Nicola's sister actually lived in the house with them, right? So it's kind of an unusual situation. Nicola and Paul weren't married, but they were sort of life partners, I guess. And then they also had 2 children together that were their children. And then Nicola's sister also lived there, right? And it's also interesting to me that Nicola's sister also seems to think that this was an accident, right? And my personal opinion, and I mean, I do have a playlist. So if you guys don't know my research and how my thinking evolved, it's interesting to me that her sister also thinks it's an accident. And I just think we're not very good at subtlety. YouTube actually teaches us to think in absolutes. Things are blatantly, obviously, shockingly clear. And like YouTube shoves that down your throat, that everything is absolutely a smoking gun. And that's not really how life works. And I can understand how in true crime, if true crime is dealing with a case, it's got to be a crime, because otherwise what are you doing with it? Like, in other words, if you're a hammer, everything else is a nail. So if you're dealing with a case where someone disappeared and yours is a true crime channel, well, then it has to be true crime. It has to be like a criminal element happened. By the same token, if you a channel that deals with mental health and you were dealing with this case, you probably say it can only be a mental health case, right? And I'm just saying we don't seem to be very good at subtlety, at actually looking at the evidence, what was happening to Nicola, not other things, what was happening to her at the time that all of this was happening. What is part of her backstory that we absolutely know what is going on with her, right? What is like part of the factual evidentiary narrative? And some people can say, I can't tell the difference between the facts and the fiction. Like somebody said that they saw someone there. Well, that's not a fact. That's just kind of hearsay. This YouTube channel said that there's women are being pushed into rivers all over the place as a serial killer. Okay, so is that factual, right? And that is something I've actually covered myself. I've covered a what can I call it? A pattern of women dying in rivers all over Britain. It's actually quite scary. I've probably covered 5 or 6 different cases. And are they all foul play? What do you think the answer is? Are they all accidents? What do you think the answer is? And in this regard, I must say, for me, the British media are, I wouldn't say completely reliable. Anyway, let's just watch the last bit of this little documentary preview.
More family. Has had a really tough time.
So, one does wonder what is going to be ultimately revealed in this BBC documentary. I think it is showing early in October, right? Early in October. So here's a little bit more from this article, a very good article with some new information, with some new interviews that we haven't seen before. Okay, so Risky Rocket says it's showing on Thursday. So I think is that the 3rd of October? I think we're going to hear the 91 or the 111 call. I presume that's going to be played. And I think if so, that'll be for the first time. I do want to touch on where they mention here, over here. Can you guys see this? At a news conference days before she was found, Lancashire police told the public Nicola had significant issues with alcohol brought on by ongoing struggles. Not that she just had a struggle that week or that month or for 2 months, but ongoing struggles. These were quite long-term struggles. And then it's not uncommon to go through it young. Louise tells the documentary, but Nikki had it tough. So not only does she have ongoing struggles, but she has, they're tough struggles. And then she says, I guess over about a 3-week period in total, she wasn't functioning like normal Nikki. Now, what I would like to know is that the 3-week period in January or December? In other words, just before this happened, was the tough struggle becoming actually overwhelming, like overwhelmingly tough, right? And you've got to integrate this reality. In other words, this is part of Nicola Bulley's experience, her life story. You've got to integrate this into, is it an accident, is it foul play, or is it something else? In other words, you've got to integrate her emotional and psychological reality into the statistical likelihood of what happened to her. And I think a lot of people who say foul play just completely conveniently ignore this. And to some extent, also those who say it's an accident, they just, no, we're not really interested in who Nicola Bulley was. Like we don't really want to know who this person was. We just want to know the circumstances. We don't want to know what her hopes and fears were. We don't want to get to know her as a human being. We're just projecting onto her what we think happened. We're not really allowing the reality to speak for itself. In other words, subtle things that are not so obvious. Are you able to listen? Are you open to hearing and feeling and sensing and perceiving those things? Or do you just project in a very hammer and nail way something that is very simple, but it ends up being overly simple and kind of reductionist, right? Okay, going a little bit further into this, Paul describes Nicola had developed trouble sleeping. So look at all of this, what's going on. Ongoing struggles that were tough. It wasn't just a little bit of struggle, it was tough. There was a 3-week period where she wasn't even functioning properly. She was having trouble sleeping. There was lack of sleep, irritability, brain fog, right? She'd be awake for hours in the night, hot sweats every single day. Everything was becoming difficult. Now, all of these statements, all of these descriptions aren't coming from social media or the news. It's coming from the people that are the closest to her, right? Now, I just want to be explicit in saying that an inquest was held, and the inquest found that Nicola Bulley died not because of foul play, so that the official finding is that it's not foul play. The official finding was that she died of an accident. And I'm going to say I disagree with the official finding. I don't like to disagree with it because often when you do, you are often going, it seems unavoidable that you are heading into the territory of what's not proved, what's not provable, and what's conspiracy. And so often I find the police findings are, they may not be accurate, but they're on the right track. So in other words, I would say an accident is certainly more on the right track than foul play. But is it the actual right track? I don't think it is. So the official finding in the Nicola Bulley case, I don't actually agree with. And I think that her sister saying on this, in this documentary, that it was an accident, why does it have to be more than that? I think that's more accurate than the foul play conspiracy, but I do think the real thing is something else. And I kind of can understand being in denial about that. I can also understand being uncomfortable about that whole thing. But it's interesting that they're talking about all of this evidence, psychological evidence of kind of psychological trauma and difficulty. And it's not to say that it's a little bit of psychological difficulty. It's quite systemic, right? And I think we've all been there. Right now, I'm having a little bit of trouble sleeping. And, you know, when you add one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, that's when you need to try and de-escalate your stress, right? Anyone can be overwhelmed if there's enough stress, anybody. And so what we want to look at here was how much stress was Nicola under, not how much stress do you think she was under, how much stress was she under, how was she experiencing it? Mandy, good to see your little dog there as well. I'll call my dog over a little bit later, right? And I think that's a big problem in true crime is people aren't open or curious to allowing the evidence to be what it is. It's always got to be interpreted. It's always got to be people putting themselves onto the case, onto the evidence. And I think one of the cases where you're the most likely to do that, to project, to be a victim of your own transference, is the John Benet Ramsey case, where if you didn't have a good relationship with your father, or you've got a particular attitude to men, then you might think John Ramsey committed the crime. If you have a particular attitude to women and women being emotional, you might think Patsy committed the crime. If you have a certain level of paranoia, you think a pedophile committed the crime. And to what extent do you look at it and go, what does the evidence actually tell us? Like, let's just let the evidence speak for itself. And I think that's a real weakness in true crime. I often think true crime creators pander to the anxieties and paths of least resistance of the audience rather than being authentically, let's find out really what happened here. It's not, let's find out what happened here and meanwhile I do need to make a living. It's, how can I make a living profiting off people's anxieties and paranoias? And what that does is a disservice to society. It is making people more anxious and more paranoid than they should be. And it's creating a more paranoid society as a result, which eventually has political implications. Just have a look at where we are now. Something else is up to 23%. But yeah, accident, 37%, foul play, 41%. I don't want to spend too much more time on the Nicola Bulley case. Like I said, I haven't seen the documentary. I hope you guys will, and let me know what you thought. I'm going to just go through a little bit more, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So yeah, Nicola stopped taking hormone replacement therapy over that period and began drinking to deal with it. So you're kind of getting a sense here that what specifically was going on, what specifically was her coping strategy, and what specifically was the original underlying issue. And so Louise says it was a normal weird blip. That's the honest answer I can give you. Now, how can you speak to someone else's mental health in a way that they would as well, right? And I'm going to give you guys a very weird example. Last night, I didn't really expect to do this, but I watched a road trip movie with Will Ferrell and I actually don't know the other guy's name. Is it Andrew Steele? But it's called Will and Harper. And it's about two friends. One of them makes a discovery about themselves and then they go on a road trip. And it's really all about rediscovering who you are and recalibrating your relationships with everyone else in the outside world. And what I'm trying to get at through that comparison is just to say, many of us keep our private lives private, and to some extent, incredibly so. Like other people around us have no idea, no inkling of what we're going through. And I think a lot of people think that the people around us are what you see is what you get. There's not really much going on. Perhaps because that's what's going on with you. Perhaps you wear your heart on your sleeve. Perhaps you don't keep many secrets, but not everyone's like that. And so you may think, I'm simple, I'm straightforward, there's not much subtlety to me. Well, I think there probably is, but you might not think so. The truth is there's a lot of subtlety to anyone and everybody. Everyone has a private, secret life. And some people have an extraordinary amount of stuff that they've got to go through. And it's easy for somebody else right next to them to minimize it because they're not going through it. And so to say, Nicola couldn't sleep, but it was just normal. It was just a phase. Maybe it wasn't for Nicola, maybe. And for a long time when I covered the Nicola Bulley case, I couldn't help just thinking of Virginia Woolf. It was just something that started to come into, maybe intuitively, come into my sort of field of association. And I must say that sense has never left. And you might say, well, that's how you're transferring it. That's your transference. You might be right, but I would argue that the evidence supports the idea that we're dealing with something else here and something else that's quite subtle. Right. I can go into it in more detail, but I'm not going to do it right here. Let's just go through a little bit more here. Police officers investigating Nicola's disappearance said they felt they had to release personal information about her struggle. And what you're seeing there is that even the police felt this is serious enough that we need to mention it. It wasn't like, yeah, she sometimes is in a funny mood and sometimes she has bad days. The police felt this is significant enough that we need to mention it. And for me, one of the most shocking and disturbing things about the whole Nicola Bulley case was the uproar about how dare you share someone's personal information like that. And you might say, no, but you are wrong. It's not, that is private. You might say, it's absolutely unacceptable to talk about this sort of thing. It's just totally wrong. And then it's like, isn't some member of the royal family, isn't his sort of charity and his whole thing about, I want to talk about mental health. I want to talk about Princess Diana's mental health. I want to make mental health something that we are prepared to acknowledge and we are prepared to discuss and we are prepared to talk about. And so I must have found the hysteria, as far as I'm concerned, like, how dare you talk about that someone is maybe having difficulty with drinking? And it's like, I sometimes have difficulty with drinking. Sometimes I drink more, sometimes I drink less. When I write a lot of books and I can't sleep, I can't sleep. Sometimes I drink a little bit of wine, then I drink more wine, eventually I drink whiskey. Yeah, those are my struggles. Is that like so surprising? Is it like, no, don't tell people, this is private? Or is it part of being a human being? Sometimes you stress, sometimes you're in a good place. If you're not in a good place, shouldn't you tell anyone about it? Sorry, I don't get it. I don't know if it's a stiff upper lip thing in Britain. Maybe it's just in parts of Britain, but I think it's crazy. Like in America, when there's an incident where a lot of people die, the first thing everyone says in a way that I don't think is helpful is, well, this is a mental health issue. And yet on the other side of the pond, please, we don't want to talk about mental health, anything but that. Let's talk about the weather, you know? So the fact that even the inquest didn't really want to go into that area because it's like, it's a sensitive area. We don't want to talk about it. Okay. I don't know, just find it crazy. And so going into when I really did a study of a lot of these women who ended up disappearing in rivers, and I looked at how the media were treating it, like they would say, we don't think it's foul play, but then they wouldn't say anything further. Must I found like, wow, okay. The denial here is pretty systemic, to use that word again. So here it goes on. Because of the commentary that was coming up on social media, Paul was just key to a lot of people's theories, and we had to negate that. And I don't have a problem with that. I think because Paul seemed to me, and I think to a lot of people, he seemed kind of emotionless. And often in a situation like this, an intimate partner is a natural suspect. I think it did make sense for the police to exclude him, to say no. Not only did he have an alibi, I mean, he was somewhere else, but he's been excluded by a reason of something else being a greater factor. And I think what we're talking about here is someone being a danger to themselves. That's what we're really talking about. And so the family were not happy about Nicola's alcohol and menopause struggles being revealed to the public. And Paul said Nicola would have been mortified about the information being shared. And maybe that is something that needs to be changed. Maybe that's like a culture towards ourselves that needs to shift, that really needs to change. I just want to see if there's anything. Yeah, so ultimately, what was the official finding? There you have it. A coroner ruled Miss Bulley's death as accidental, saying she'd fallen into the river and suffered cold water shock. And this is the part that I find pretty incredible. No evidence to suggest that. What have we just dealt with above here? What's all of this? Can you classify all of this and that and that and that? Can you classify that as absolutely no evidence? I don't mind if you say there was some evidence, or there was a little bit of evidence, but maybe it doesn't reach the bar or the level that's required here. But to say no evidence, where's that? There was no evidence to suggest that, to me, is it's illogical. It's not accurate. It's not true. And maybe someone saying that is basically saying, I don't actually understand how mental health works. Like, I actually don't know what happens when someone is struggling mentally. I don't know what it looks like, because you can't say that there was no evidence of that. And so this is what I really disagree with. Sometimes bad things just happen. If you if you applied that to true crime and to like what happened to Jay Slater and what happened to the Titan submersible and what happened to the Watts family, sometimes bad things just happen. No. Things are connected. There are patterns and dynamics that are playing out that we just don't understand. And when they play out and you say something's bad, sometimes bad things just happen, and you shrug your shoulders, guess what? Sometimes bad things are going to happen again because you're not paying attention to what's happening around you, because you can't recognize things that are taking place around you. And I think we need to be better as a society, as individuals, to notice people right next to us, that bad things are happening in a pattern, in a process, and maybe we can interrupt them. Maybe that could have happened with Carly Gregg. Bad things are happening here. It's not bad things just happening. It's happening within a dynamic, right? I've always believed that. Like, I don't believe things are fragmented and random. I believe they're all part of a process. Even random things like accidents are often accidents waiting to happen. Even if you are in a car accident, it's likely it's not accidental. Maybe you should have fixed your tires or gotten enough sleep or not looked on your phone. It's not just an accident. I think accidents are seldom accidental. That is a interesting point, and if it's true, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with making an official finding in order to be kind of sentimental and to protect someone's feelings, because you're actually not doing anyone any favors, right? Anyway, that's just my opinion. I guess not everyone can deal with reality. I think that's also a fact. And so one thing I recognize is, if I'm all about dealing with reality and facing things, that doesn't give me the right to impose that on someone else, to say, you must deal with reality. If it's your choice not to, that's your choice. Maybe you can't actually deal with, not you, someone. Maybe you just can't, you don't have the tools to deal with it, or your tool for dealing with it is to not deal with it. Some people are just like that. But I mean, I'm just saying, I think we need to be better at picking up cues from other people. I mean, I was recently at a barbecue and someone asked me something, and the night was drawing on, and I had to interrupt the whole thing and say, you know what, I think I need to leave. It's late. I see you guys are getting quite tired. You need to, instead of being self-aware of yourself, I think it also helps to have awareness of other people, what they're going through, and stepping into their shoes. I also think if you're around a lot of people who are in denial, or who don't confront reality, or who don't like to be accountable, I think that can almost make one try and overcompensate in that regard. So that's also something just to be conscious of. But I do think saying this sort of thing, sometimes bad things just happen. I just wish it didn't happen to us. If that is your assessment at the end of the day, I don't know whether there's any guarantee that in the future you're going to avoid this sort of outcome, because bad things don't just happen. If you think critically, if you prepare, if you're aware, if you're perceptive, then you can mitigate bad things happening. It's like if you go on a trip, did you pack everything? What haven't I thought about? Have I done this? Have I done that? What haven't I done? It's not just sometimes bad things happen. Obviously, in retrospect, when something bad has happened, maybe it does help to minimize it in order to get over it, especially early on. Like, I can definitely understand if something traumatic has happened to you, you do sometimes need to move on just so that you can survive, and you might need to, for a certain period, go down a path that allows you to do that, and that's certainly understandable. But saying I just wish it didn't happen to us. On true crime, we're dealing with crimes happening all the time. Wishing something's not going to happen is not going to help you. Being armed with knowledge is going to help you, right? Okay, let's just have a quick look at where we are with the poll. Foul play, 43%. That's what people seem to want to believe. Okay. Right, so we're going to go from this, Nicola Bulley, to Madeleine McCann. Before we do, by the way, this is my playlist on the Nicola Bulley. If you're interested in how my thinking evolved and where it came from, then you can go through it. It's 24 episodes. And let's just see. Yeah, towards the end, I covered Claire Marshall. I also covered other women that went missing in rivers. And you guys might find that intertextuality worth thinking about. So I'll put that a link to the playlist there if you're not sure where else to find it. I must say I tend to kind of feel the same as Kick's graphics. The fact that foul play is so high is, for me, it's actually quite alarming. It's definitely alarming. And one's kind of going to ask, is this because of what people really think, or is this because of the influence of YouTube and TikTokers and social media? And I think it's maybe both. Okay, should we go into Madeleine McCann? So how about applying this whole idea to that case as well? Was the Madeleine McCann case an accident or foul play? Like, did somebody deliberately murder Madeleine McCann? And I'm pretty sure if you voted that Nicola Bulley was a victim of foul play, you won't have a moment's hesitation to say, yes, Madeleine was murdered. I believe that, right? I don't, by the way. I don't think Madeleine was murdered. I don't think anyone deliberately or intentionally killed her, right? But I think if you believe Nicola Bulley was murdered, you also believe Madeleine was murdered, right? And I think you probably also believe JonBenet Ramsey was murdered. Just check yourself on that. Write down those three names: Nicola Bulley, JonBenet Ramsey, Madeleine McCann, and Jay Slater. Do you believe all four of them were murdered? Well, in all four cases, that's not what the official police narrative is. Or certainly in the Ramsey case, what the grand jury, well, actually, I'm not with the JonBenet Ramsey case. Anyway, let's stick to Madeleine McCann. So what I'm going to do now is I want to test the critical thinking of, especially my. Why is this here? How do I get rid of this? Okay, there we did it. So I want to test the critical thinking of my core followers of this channel, right? Those who read a lot of my books, those who know me, those who think critically. And I want to see at what point you reach the point where you think critically about this story, right? So are you guys ready? So Madeleine McCann's suspect, Christian Bruckner, he confessed to that from an Algarve apartment. That's according to a former cellmate. Now, what that's already telling you is he didn't confess to abducting Madeleine, just a girl, but Madeleine is a girl. And he didn't confess to abducting her from the Ocean Club, but from an apartment in the Algarve. And of course, the Ocean Club is in the Algarve, right? And so if you're thinking intertextually, that's exactly the same scenario that played out with Gary Oliver in the JonBenet Ramsey case, is that Gary Oliver I think the night that John Bonet died, called a school friend and said, I hurt a little girl. So he didn't say, I hurt John Bonet. I mean, why wouldn't you say her name? He says, I hurt a little girl. So John Bonet was a little girl and she was hurt. So was he talking about her? Of course he was talking about her. John Bonet is a little girl and he said he hurt a little girl. But then why didn't he say John Bonet? Didn't he know her name was John Bonet? Then the second thing is, Gary Oliva was in Boulder when this happened. John Bonet was in Boulder when this happened. But there's like a little bit of a problem here. So if he confesses to doing it, then didn't he confess to doing it? But then when he's asked directly, did you do it? He says, no, I didn't. The same thing with Christian Bruckner. But what I'm trying to get at here is, even to the cellmate, he's not confessing to abducting Madeleine, and he's not confessing to the apartment either. The other thing is, you're dealing with a confession given to you by a felon, a convicted felon. Your witness here is a convicted felon. So is that really a reliable witness? But none of that should really be the thing that really convinces you that Christian Bruckner is not a credible suspect. So what is it? So let's go through this. I'll put a link to this article in chat if you guys are ready. So he says, the 47-year-old is said to have asked inmate Laurencio Coden if he too was behind bars for child offenses. Then he says that Bruckner begged him to burn down his lair, which is in Germany, by the way. It's not in Portugal. So really, did he take Madeleine's DNA or whatever to Germany? Well, then why did they have to search the reservoir in Portugal? I don't get it. Then he says, can DNA from a child be taken from bones under the ground? So, yeah, they're saying Coden told a story which bore striking similarities to the night Maddie disappeared. Now, there's another side to this. Did he not read the paper, and perhaps he doesn't like Bruckner and he's trying to falsely implicate him? Wouldn't be the first time an inmate did that. John Mark Carr did exactly that, where everything he knew, he got from public knowledge. And so people who didn't know any better thought, wow, how could he possibly know this? Well, it's actually in the media. Like if you read a lot of newspapers, you would have known this. And anyway, John Mark Carr wasn't even in the same state when the crime happened. So, you've got someone who, after the fact, for his own sick reasons, wanted to be associated with the John Bonet Ramsey case. So how do we think critically about this particular narrative? So let's go through this part. Bruckner told me that in Portugal that he had stolen there. He was in a region where there are hotels and rich people. So is that evidence to say he was in Portugal? Okay, well, Portugal is where Madeleine disappeared. Okay, so that's tick. He had stolen there. Well, nothing was stolen from the apartment. He was in a region where there are hotels and rich people. Is Praia de Luz a region where there are hotels and rich people? I don't know whether they're necessarily rich people there, but there certainly are hotels. I guess there are some mansions, but that could actually be anywhere along the Algarve, and so why not just say I was in Praia de Luz? So is that a tick, or is that okay? So he was in a region where there are hotels and rich people, but did he say that I was at the Ocean Club? No. And then here it is. This is the part. He said there was somewhere with an open window. Right? He was somewhere with an open window. Was there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case? Is there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case? Funny enough, we're talking about exactly this question. Was there really a broken window in the John Benet Ramsey case? Is there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case, yes or no? Let's see how well you guys know this case. Yes or no, is there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case? He says there was somewhere with an open window. In other words, the window was already open, right? He said there was somewhere with an open window. Can't you say, well, I went to the Ocean Club, I went to that hotel, and the window was open? And he was looking for money. He said he didn't find any money. Well, guess what? There was a camera in the house. I found a kid and took the child. Actually, there were 2 other kids there. He said that 2 hours later, there were police and dogs all over the place. So he then went away out of the area. Again, he doesn't ever identify the place. I'm just saying what he told me. He told me that a person was with him who he had an argument with. Allegedly, it was his woman. But here's the problem. There was no fingerprints whatsoever found of some third party in the window of the 5A, right? The only person's fingerprints found on the window was Kate McCann's. And from what the police could determine, there was no breaking and entry into the shutters. The shutters weren't damaged. By the way, I've been to Praia de Luz. I've stood right outside apartment 5A. I stayed in a hotel in Praia de Luz. I almost broke the shutters because I couldn't figure out how they worked. I didn't know you must use like a conveyor belt. By the way, Jerry McCann, I think, broke the shutters of their bedroom because he couldn't figure it out. You tend to think, well, you just lift up the shutters, but there's like a conveyor belt on the side that you use to, it's almost like a seat belt that you use to move the shutters up or down. And so there's no fingerprints on the shutters. There's certainly no damage to the shutters. And I think Jerry's story was that he closed, if you look at crime scene photos, the window is closed and the shutters are closed. So if you think about it, in order for that to happen, it's the same exact situation with the Ramsey case. The window was supposedly open, but then somebody else closed it who's innocent. If the window was open, why isn't the window open? Simple as that, right? The answer is, was there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case? No, there was an open door. If you know the Madeleine McCann case, you know that the answer was the sliding door was the only way you could get in without breaking and entering. The sliding door was unlocked, right? That's what you would know. I don't know how to create a new poll. Is it possible to create a new poll? I guess I could. Is there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case? So shall I quickly put that up? I think I can. I know I can. Are you guys ready? Let's see what you guys say. Is there, I guess it's kind of a trick question because some might say, yes, I heard something about an open window, but the question is, was there evidence of an open window? Let's see what you guys say. Start poll. Let's see what you say. $80-20. Interesting. So a quarter of you think that the window was open. Okay. So I would say the same quarter of you probably think Christian Bruckner is the perpetrator here, right? Put up your hand if you voted yes. Do you also vote that Christian Bruckner makes sense as a suspect? Anyway, that's Madeleine is still missing. Hamilton Art says, wow, these cases are new to me. Okay, so now we're going to go on to Carly Gregg. You guys know that she is appealing. Carly Gregg, if you don't know, she, not sure what this is. What's going on here? This is not right. I'm not quite sure why this is coming up. It's obviously just... Anyway, let me get rid of that. Not sure what I did there. Let's just put up... So Carly Gregg was a 14-year-old who shot her mother and has just been found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, and she's now seeking a new trial. She wants to appeal the trial.
What's floating in the air around you? Contaminants like dust, mold, and allergens can wreak havoc on your family.
One more second, okay. Skip.
County teen who's been convicted and sentenced for killing her mother are appealing that decision. It's based on information they claim was mentioned during an interview with WLBT. There's just one problem: their claim is not true. Earlier this week, our reporters interviewed Carly Gregg's biological father, who said she was a wonderful child but had suicidal thoughts at an early age after her parents separated. Days later, Gregg's attorney, Bridget Todd, filed this appeal, claiming...
Now, again, I can't believe how different, for example, the Nicola Bulley case is to this case. Now, in this case, they're trying to say Carly Gregg had terrible mental illness. It's the mental illness that really killed her mother. You know, like blame everything on mental illness. Now, you go to England and it's like, we don't want to talk about mental illness. It was an accident, and we must be sensitive about this. And yeah, you've got another family basically saying, you know what, she had serious mental problems all along. It's a totally different attitude to it. And on the one side, it's you kind of get the sense that it's denial. I don't want to talk about it. It's too sensitive. It's off the table. We refuse to deal with it. On the other side, it's getting too much attention. It's kind of the scapegoat for otherwise unacceptable behavior. It's crazy. It's such a contradiction in attitudes to mental health. And couldn't be more contradictory, right?
That new information from our interview warrants a new trial. Todd alleges that Gregg's father admitted to placing his daughter in equestrian therapy because she was hearing voices. But a thorough review of the transcript of that interview and the reporters who worked on the story reveal Gregg's father never said anything about that. It's not clear why Todd has said these things to the court. We did reach out to her yesterday, but she has not yet gotten back with us. You can read the appeal for yourself on our website, WLBT.com.
What's floating in the air around you? Contaminants like...
What's floating in the air around you? Sometimes it's nothing's floating in the air around you. I guess, but sometimes things are. Okay, so the irony is also that it's her own family members that are saying that she's got the serious mental illness or serious mental problems, and it's not like lawyers; it's her own family. and so that's why she can't be guilty, or she should be allowed to have the possibility of parole. It's just a totally different way of defending someone. Anyway, here's another news report dealing with the same case. Now, what's crazy about this case is you've literally got the crime recorded on video. So you can literally see everything taking place except kind of the critical moment, which you can hear. And so, in other words, you've got this extremely rare thing in true crime where you actually have the crime pretty much the premeditation, the run up to the trial, the crime, the incident itself, certainly the timing of it and the sounds of it recorded, and then the aftermath coming out of the room, all of that's recorded, all of that's on camera. And people can still look at that and say, I think she was struggling with the mental health. And there's a moment shortly after she shot her mother, 3 shots, that she's sitting on a chair and she's texting. And she walks straight to it's not like her mother's shouting at her and she's traumatized. And, it's just like it happens completely clinically, like out of the cold, thin ether kind of thing. But what's interesting is just how intentionally she acts after that. And after she texts her father to ask him where he is, her stepfather, she then kind of talks to the dogs and seems to even sing to them. And I guess you could say her singing to the dogs is completely, that's a sign of mental illness, or it's a sign of someone who's incredibly nonchalant. And so that's a very slippery slope where you say mental illness is the reason for everything. So when someone commits a crime, did the mental illness commit it, or did the person commit it? If you said the person committed it and there's no mental problem there, then you're saying normal people commit crimes, which is not untrue. But I would say any normal person that's stressed enough, caught up in an escalating psychology enough, is capable of committing a crime. But I would equally say without that dynamic there, most people don't commit crimes. So there is an element, and I don't want to say mental illness to crime, but certainly mental compromise, where someone is stressed, addicted, or in some other way caught up in some kind of struggle, and they feel like committing the crime is a way of cheating their way out of their circumstances. So stress is a factor, but then just saying, no, I am mental illness. In other words, the mental illness has actually overtaken me as a human being, and thus I'm not responsible for my actions. The mental illness is. That's why I hate it when people say he's a psychopath or a narcissist or a. No, the person committed the crime, not the disorder. Don't blame the disorder, blame the person, right? Okay, so let's just finish up with this. So I look, I don't know this case so well, but I don't think she's going to get the appeal. I did read some of the appeal, and it seemed like they were mentioning a whole bunch of things. It seemed like they were throwing spaghetti against the ceiling, hoping something would stick. I think there's just a very strong case against her. She didn't only try to kill her mother. Well, she killed her mother. She tried to kill her father. She also ran away. She made incriminating statements. all of it's caught on video, and it goes on and on and on. And then there's, of course, the drug narrative. So, I honestly don't think she should be given an appeal. The jury only took 2 hours to reach a verdict. What's the other thing? There's another thing that's also quite important in terms of this case. Anyway, that's just kind of slipped my mind. It's a little bit of a subtle point. It's kind of similar to the Rust case, which is the case needs to be heard all over again because certain evidence wasn't made available. Well, if somebody told, this came out in an interview with the media. So an interview that came out in the media is hardly secret knowledge that you can't get hold of. You would imagine that is knowledge that someone elected not to use. And whose fault is it that they didn't use it? And you have the same thing in the Rust case, by the way. That's breaking news today, that the judges denied Hannah Gutierrez's motion for her to appeal, which I think is the right decision. But think about that case in Hannah Gutierrez Reed. The defense had evidence about those rounds, right? And they elected not even to mention that in court, right? They had that evidence, and they elected not to use it. And the defense in the Alec Baldwin case is that evidence that they didn't use, that the defense in the Hannah Gutierrez Reed case didn't use, because they thought it was so lacking in exculpatory value. Alec Baldwin's defense was saying we could have potentially found our client innocent using that evidence. And the judge actually bought that bullshit story. I mean, I don't know, it's crazy. And I must say, it is a really interesting contradiction that the evidence in Hannah Gutierrez Reed's case doesn't qualify her for a appeal, and yet it allowed Alec Baldwin's case to be dismissed. To me, it's a blatant contradiction. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that case. Okay, so we're going to go from Carly Gregg to Brian Kohberger. Anyone know what the news is in the Brian Kohberger case? Anyone know what the latest is? So thus far, the trial has moved to Boise, Idaho. By the way, I've been inside that courtroom. I attended the trial of Lori Vallow for multiple court days. You can't actually see it, but on my wall I've got in a frame 1, 2, 3, 4, about 9 of the tickets that we were allocated to get into the court trial, get into the court each day to hear the trial. So you did like an online lottery, and then they allocated you a ticket, but like a digital ticket, and then you picked up a real ticket stub, which was almost like a movie ticket that allowed you to go into the trial. So the Brian Kohberger case is going to be heard in the same court building. And so what they are trying to determine now is when the trial should be heard, either May or September. So the original date was June, but they don't want it to be in June now because it's summer and the jury are going to be away from their kids and things like that. And then also, can Brian Kohberger be dressed in a suit, in civilian clothes? What do you guys think? Should he be dressed in civilian clothes? So let's just have a look. Is there an open window in the Madeleine McCann case? 2/3 of you have answered, as far as I'm concerned, with the right answer. And what the question is, was the window originally open? And the answer is no. Was the window open subsequently? Well, there doesn't seem to be any proof of that. Is that the defense case? Well, yes, it is. It's also the defense case in the Ramsey case. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll and start a third poll and ask you guys whether you agree. Can I have a third poll? You guys want a third poll? Should Brian Kohberger be allowed to wear civilian clothes to his murder trial? What do you guys think? Should he be given the benefit of the doubt? Should he be allowed to look kind of innocent? Let's see what you guys say. Should Kohberger be allowed to wear civilian clothes? 75% so far say yes. Now it's 2/3. So far we've got about 40 votes. 2/3 say yes. Let's see when we get to 50 votes. Still about 2/3 say yes. Couple more votes, please. Yeah, so basically 2/3 of you say he should. Now, I think what this shows, I mean, the whole idea of, and I think he will be allowed to testify in civilian clothes, and I think he should be allowed to. But what this just shows is there's a kind of a natural bias towards the defense. The burden is on the state to prove guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and part of that whole thing is having him look like an innocent person. You know, like the opposite would be that he comes into court in prison garb, shackled, unshaved, looking really scraggly, and he looks like he may have committed a crime. Now you have him dressed in a certain way, the way that's going to best suit your case. Amanda Knox used that whole thing very cleverly in her trial. She changed her appearance in a way. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that right now. But accused, and even Carly Gregg did that. You know how she went to court wearing that Nirvana shirt that she wore when she killed her mother. Now she dresses in like a Patsy Ramsey outfit. She looks totally different. Well, she actually doesn't look that different. But the whole idea is to try and make her look nothing like, in a way, who she really is, or who she recognizably is, in terms of the media narrative. But anyway, let's listen to some of what was dealt with in the motions hearing with Brian Kohberger. So I just want to play that again because I really wanted you guys to catch that little piece. Good point. Good point. So I thought that was a really interesting comment from the judge, kind of snarky, kind of basically just expressing his disdain for the whole case, right? He's basically saying, I don't really want to be here. I don't really want to cover this case. I don't really want to deal with any of this. And I'd like to hear from you guys. Why do you think he feels that way? And first, that's the first question. Why do you think he feels that way? And then secondly, do you agree with him? Like, do you think this is a bad sign that this judge has got a bad attitude, or do you think you kind of understand where he's coming from? Oh, was there no sound? Well, let me play it again. Sorry about that.
Mr. Nye and Ms. Beatty from the Attorney General's office, and then we have victim support staff with us.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Defense?
Ann Taylor, attorney for Brian Kohberger, Elisa Massa, and Jay Logston,
Okay, here it
counsel for
comes.
Mr. Kohberger as well.
Thank you. All right. Like to tell you I'm happy to be here, but why start with an untruth? I
Elisa
Let's start
Massa
again.
and Jay Logston, counsel for Mr. Kohberger as well.
Thank you. All right. Like to tell you I'm happy to be here, but why start with an untruth?
So, what do you think of that? Do you think that's inappropriate? Do you think it's understandable? What do you guys think? Why do you think he's saying that to begin with? He's basically saying, I don't want to be here. I'm not happy to I'm not happy to be here. I don't really want to be dealing with this case in this court. And at a certain point, he says, this trial, which I think is slated to be 2 or 3 months, is basically going to run the entire summer. It's going to and he's saying, I'm really concerned about the jury. The jury are going to be away from their families for months at a time. And I want to try and just make it as painless for them as I possibly can. The other thing is, for 2 or 3 months, and I've been in that court building, you're going to have security, you're going to have the media, you're going to have basically a circus surrounding the court and kind of disrupting so much. So many resources need to be steered into this area. And it just in terms of lawyers and judges and courtrooms doing their thing, a high-profile case like this is really kind of disruptive. It ends up just sucking a lot of resources in terms of personnel, money, and facilities that would normally go to other cases. Do you guys want to listen to a bit more from this?
I am accepting of my responsibility to be here. I want to go over with you some expectations of mine, given that I don't think any of you, other than Ms. Massoth, have appeared in front of me before. When you file memorandums of law, briefs, etc., please provide a Word copy by email to my staff attorney. After today's hearing, you may get that from staff here today. Today, I know there was an issue that was brought up with respect to Mr. Kohberger's attire for today. I did issue an order yesterday permitting him to appear in civilian clothes for this hearing only. That is a matter in terms of future hearings that we will take up in a closed hearing the day of, but in advance of whatever our next hearing date.
So if you think about this question, like let's say you are the judge, you've got to decide, should he be allowed to wear civilian clothes or not? Consider what we know about a lot of other trials we've covered. Did Casey Anthony appear in prison clothing? Pretty much never. Did Chris Watts appear in prison clothing? Yeah, he did. Remember, he wore that sort of orange jumpsuit, right, to court. So he did. Did Alec Murdaugh appear in prison clothing? I think the answer is sometimes he did, mostly he didn't. I'm actually trying to think, did Alec Murdaugh ever appear in court in prison clothing. I mean, I know he definitely did appear in. I remember he wore a white shirt and I think khaki kind of slacks. But I'm trying to think if he ever appeared in court. Something tells me he did, but I'm not 100% sure. But think about a lot of the perpetrators that have been on trial. I would say most of them appear in civilian clothing. Think about Hannah Gutierrez Reed. I think Jodi Arias appeared in like black and white barred prison outfit, but I think that was during her the sentencing phase. I don't, yeah, during the guilt phase, she kind of looked like a librarian. She sort of dressed in, kind of lady suits and that sort of thing. So for the most part, you do tend to have people standing in trial in civilian clothes. You had that in this courtroom, you had that with Laurie Vallow and Laurie Vallow and Chad Daybell, right? So it wouldn't be any surprise if Brian is present in a suit. It wouldn't be strange. One person that I must say I can't imagine appearing in a suit is Richard Allen from the Delphi case. I think every time we've seen him appear, he's been in like a jumpsuit, right?
Will be. My intention will be that Mr. Kohberger will not be present for that hearing because part of what we will be discussing are security measures. And I expect to hear from the transport deputies and the bailiffs regarding security issues that they want to address or that I have questions for them about.
So let me ask you a question. Why would the judge not want Kohberger present? I don't know if it's a stupid question, but let's see what you guys answer. Why would the judge not want Kohberger to be present for security issues that they're going to discuss? Why would he need to not be aware of those? There we go. That's part of it, right? So you can't. And think about what happened with Caitlin Armstrong. There you had someone that did try to escape just before her trial. I think the other aspect, although I don't think it's really pertinent, is also his security. That he needs to be protected, and I suppose you could, in a way, foil your own court case deliberately by telling someone what the security is, and then they could do something, and it could move the trial again, or could postpone the trial again. So there could be that issue as well. But I think the primary thing is so that they can prevent him from escaping. As soon as you have him dress up think about this. As soon as you allow him to dress up as a civilian, well, that means if he slips your notice, well, he looks like a civilian, you're not going to identify him as easily as if he's in prison garb. So that's kind of a dual security issue. By allowing him to dress up like everybody else, you also have a potential security situation there, right? Do you remember Caitlin Armstrong was running in like prison kind of pajamas? But I think some of it she changed out of, seem to remember. It was either the shirt or something where she was trying to, something like that. Anyway.
So that I can make an appropriate ruling in terms of his appearance here, but weighing that not just against, of course, his rights, but also against the needs of security in this case. I do expect, as it probably will come to no surprise to you, for you all to get along. I understand the stakes in this case are as high as they can possibly be in each case, but you are professionals. You have taken oaths, both as of officers within your jurisdictions, but also as attorneys before this bar. So I expect at all times for you to remain civil to one another, that you not engage in personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, that you not engage in theatrics, not misstate the facts or the law to the court. And when you cite arguments in your briefs, if there is contradictory precedent, I expect to see that.
So I'm going to disagree with some of you. I read some of your comments. I agree with the comment he made where he said, I don't, to be honest with you guys, I don't really want to be here. You know, that is what he said to the court. And I think the reason he said it was because he is dealing with a circus. He's dealing with this endless, infinite bickering from both sides. We want this, we want that. And you're going to, I mean, I don't know how much time, I don't really want to go too much over 2 hours, but I don't really want to spend too much time dealing with this particular hearing. But what is, you kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of it when they must just decide, do they want this case to be heard in September or in May? And they just can't agree on that. And the one has got this little problem and the other one doesn't accept this. And I personally find it exhausting. Like, my position is that the priority should be get the damn case to trial, get it heard, get it over and done with. And, you know, justice must be seen to be done. And one thing that really needs to change in terms of the law is they need to find a way to speed up the legal process, because that also really favors the defense. The longer it takes to bring a case to trial, the more amnesia and little tricks and little problems set in. And that's like a natural entropy that favors the defense always. The forgetfulness, the slow process of rust, the rusting of memories, the evidence that gets lost or misplaced, and all of that kind of thing, right? And so I feel this judge's frustration with the bickering went on for so long in the court in Moscow that eventually the judge had to just give the case away, right? And now he's got to deal with it. Now he's got to deal with someone else's case, someone else's circus. He's also got to deal with this kind of thing. A lot of lawyers, this, that, that. And it just exhausts you. It is absolutely exhausting. And, you know, the priority isn't, let's get the case to trial, let's hear the evidence. It's this kind of point scoring that goes on constantly and forever. It's just absolutely exhausting, and it really doesn't belong in a courtroom. What's the other thing that I want to bring up here? Yeah, so I would normally want to cover a case like this, every single motion, every part of it, in the same way that I covered the Chris Watts case. But there was a point where I was like, I'm done covering the Kohberger case because it's now just becoming a ridiculous tennis match that doesn't go anywhere. You know, it's like a rally where no one ever scores the winning point. And I'm not going to cover that. And so I haven't covered any of that stuff, even though I would really like to be covering this. But I just find that whole thing, that whole process nonsensical. bring the case to trial, then I'll definitely cover it. Now, let me just say this. The outcome of this hearing is going to determine whether I'm going to be in that courtroom when the case goes to trial. So let me put it this way. They're trying to decide whether the case is going to be heard in September later. And if it is, then I won't be in that courtroom. That's like a done deal, because I'm not going to go to America in September. If the case is heard in May, then I might be there. No promises, but there's a much better chance. And I've always said, if the case is heard in Moscow, I don't think I will attend the trial. If it's held in Boise, where I've been before and I've stayed there before and I'm quite familiar with it, then I probably will attend. If it is held in May, I probably will attend. I can't help listening to the bickering between opposing counsels. And bear in mind, May is how many months from now? It's October, November, December, January, February, March, April. It's about 8 months from now. And you're going to hear the defense saying they're just not going to be ready by May, right? 8 months. How long has this been taking already? And they're saying they're just not going to be ready in 8 months. Like if I was the judge hearing that, I would struggle a bit to keep my equanimity. But anyway, let's listen to what they say.
I appreciate in advance what should go without saying that I've just said in terms of your responsibilities. But again, I just want to highlight that because I understand when the stakes are high, sometimes victory seems to be the objective when our first objective is to conform to the oaths that we've taken as members of the bar, as officers of this court. All right. I do have some matters with respect to scheduling that I want to go over today, but before I do that, I'd like to hear from you with respect to the matters that you either need to make me aware of or want to make me aware of. The other thing before I do that, though, I do know that Judge had entered a non-dissemination order. That still remains in place. And unless I, for some reason, remove that order, it will stay in place. And I expect it to be religiously adhered to by all parties, counsel, victims, counsel for the victims. And I will not tolerate violations of that. Likewise, I know that much of the evidence in this case has been subject to orders sealing under that dissemination order or otherwise have been sealed by the court. I likewise expect everyone that has access to that information, whether it's sealed documents or information in sealed hearing or the information itself in the documents, to adhere to the confidentiality expected as it relates to those. Okay, that's my one and only lecture for you for the remainder of this case. With that, let me hear from you. We'll start with counsel for the state.
Your Honor, I don't know that we have specific questions we want to propose today. We're looking forward to hearing the scheduling. I think that's going to drive for us, particularly the distance involved, any questions that we may have. I appreciate what you've already mentioned to us, and we will certainly honor all of that. Thank you, sir.
Taylor?
Thank you, Your Honor. There are a few issues that I wanted to make the court aware of as the court decides on the scheduling order. We want the court to know that our team has been working towards the June of 2025 trial date that had been issued by Judge in the case. But in candor to the court, I need to let the court know some issues that have come up that we face that causes me concern. First, the court's probably aware of the vast amount of discovery that's been exchanged in the case by reviewing the record. But since August, we have received about 398 gigabytes of new information, and I can tell the court that nobody on the team has read every bit of that yet. So there's a vast amount of discovery to continue to go through, and I wanted the court to be aware of that. The second thing is that during the course of this case, we had an expert that we were working with, and that expert passed away. We have been able to refill that role to have a new expert to do the work that that expert was hired to do, but we are not progressed to the point that I'd hoped to be through no fault of the new expert. The court should be aware of that as well. And last, as the court is very well aware, the system of delivering public defense is changing next week. As appointed counsel in the case, I do not have a contract yet. Nobody on my team is under contract for this case. I'm concerned about what that means, and I thought the court should be aware. Further, we have been able to access funding to help us prepare this case through Idaho Criminal Rule 12.2. At the current time, we're working with about 25 experts and investigators to prepare the case. I don't know if 12.2 will continue to be the way to get funding for those experts and investigators, or if that's changing. And I thought the court should know those things. Thank you.
Thank you. So I am hopeful that Mr. Fredrickson will ensure that a contract is available for you and your team next week. I have no control over that, of course, other than to, as it relates to who I permit to withdraw from this case or not withdraw from this case. As to 12.2 funding, my understanding is, and I've had a discussion with Judge Munson, who has been serving, as I understand it, as what we refer to as the money judge, actually. I guess we'll find out if that becomes a problem down the road, but that's my understanding, because that whole system that 12.2 is based upon is coming to an end. So, given your statement about the trial date, my proposal to move this case forward into May is probably not going to land well with you, but that's what I wanted to talk about, is the timing of the trial. I'm concerned with a trial as currently set for a number of reasons, but first I want to find out you, as you sit here today, what that trial looks like in terms of the number of weeks of trial, starting from after a jury is selected through the end of the evidence and before any potential sentencing phase. So what are your estimates of that?
Your Honor, I think it would be a fair estimate based on what we know at this point to have a month and a half or perhaps a bit more just for the evidence for the guilt phase of the trial. I say that knowing.
But just, is that just your evidence, or does that include defense evidence?
Well, I was just getting ready to say, I say that understanding or acknowledging that Ms. Taylor has estimated 2 to 3 months total. I do not know. We do not know what the defense has in mind for their case right now. So all I can speak to is what we anticipate for ourselves. But I would think state's evidence in chief should be able to come in a month and a half or so.
Okay. Ms. Taylor?
Your Honor, we estimate 4 weeks for the defense portion of the trial case.
Of the guilt case?
Yes, Your Honor.
So 10 weeks. In terms of if there is a penalty phase, should the defendant be convicted of one of the statutory qualifying offenses, how long do we estimate the penalty phase being?
Your Honor, from the state's perspective, I believe we're going to be relying heavily on the evidence that's introduced during the guilt phase, and that the additional evidence that would be brought in, unless there's something we learned from the defense about their experts, is probably more than a week.
Taylor?
Your Honor, I would estimate 2 weeks for that part of any trial.
That's
So I don't know if you're already picking up that the defense seems to have a lot that they want to talk about. I mean, you've already heard that the state say in a sentencing phase they do 1 week. The defense say they would do 2 weeks. So you kind of get a sense that the defense are putting up a huge defense, lots of experts and lots of things. That's in a way what I feel is making this case quite exhausting and burdening it. But ultimately, it's between a May start and a September start. As I say, if it starts in May, I would probably attend. I don't think it is going to start in May. What I can't really understand is, I'm not going to play this full thing, but all they needed to do was like compromise a bit, is where they'd say, how about, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but the judge asked the defense lawyer, how much time do you need to prepare your new expert witness? And then she said, there's no way I'm going to be ready by April. And so they ended up, I think, arguing over 1 month. So couldn't you make a compromise and make it start the case in mid-May, right? It's a little bit later than the prosecution wants, and it's slightly earlier than the defense wants. And so on that issue, they butted heads, and there's like a long discussion about that, and then it seems like they couldn't agree, and so they're going to have now another hearing to decide exactly when that's going to be. And that is why I say stuff like this just drains the energy, because you can't just agree on a date when you're going to start the trial. So you need another motion for that. And if you take all of those motions away, they could have been actually doing the work of the case instead of having all of these motions. I don't know. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so we're going to go from that to Suzanne Morphew. Do you guys know what the latest is in the Morphew case?
Barry Morphew found himself back in court facing a judge. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Anusha Roy. Morphew had filed a civil case related to what he called a malicious prosecution, was asking for $15 million in damages.
Anyone know what the outcome of that was before I let you know? I guess you can see it over there. Judge dismisses Barry Morphew's civil lawsuit. So Barry had basically sued just about everybody. It's like a long, long, long list. Well, that case for $50 million, $15 million has just been dismissed.
Morphew was arrested for murder in connection to his wife Suzanne's disappearance, but then those charges were dismissed in April of 2022. Morphew filed a civil case against Chaffee County prosecutors, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation employees, and the FBI employees. While the judge had agreed with Morphew on a couple of points, including that it should be easier to sue for a mishandled prosecution, the judge ultimately said that he had to apply the law as is currently written and had to dismiss that claim.
Now, of course, one thing that definitely didn't help Barry Morphew was at the time that he filed the claim, I suppose he had a fairly strong chance. I personally don't think he would have won it, but who knows? But he had let's just put it this way, he had a stronger chance of winning his lawsuit because Suzanne's body at that point hadn't been found. But then as time went by, investigators incredibly stumbled on her human remains. They weren't even looking for them. They stumbled on her remains. And as a result, they were able to prove that she had been murdered. And beyond that, they found a compound in the marrow of her bones that matched a compound that he was known to use. And so I don't think any of that helped with his lawsuit. And of course, none of that helps with the ongoing investigation either. Okay, so that's the news from that case. Have any of you guys seen a new documentary on Netflix called Jailbreak, Love on the Run? Do you guys remember this case? We covered it on this channel. At one point, it was quite a high-profile case. Do you remember these faces? Do those faces ring a bell? Vicky White and Casey White, right? She died during that old jailbreak scenario, and he didn't. So there's a documentary. It's on Netflix right now. It's called Jailbreak, Love on the Run. It's about Casey White, who escaped prison, and of course, there's a prison guard that fell in love with him and facilitated his escape. And so it examines their romantic relationship and how Casey was ultimately caught. So if you haven't watched it, watch it. If you do watch it and you want more, like you kind of you found the whole thing really interesting. Is there any more information? Well, I covered this case as it was happening in real time, and I put up 15 videos. So if you guys wanna follow my coverage, again, watch the Netflix docuseries and then come and check out this playlist. Some of the videos include warrant issued for Vicky White. We didn't know if she was romantically involved in the beginning, and then it was very clear that she was. We saw how they ditched different vehicles, and then there was a very dramatic chase at the end. There was even a 911 call in the middle of all of that. And yeah. Does anyone remember how Vicky died? Anyone remember? Anyway, that's a link to the playlist. Okay, so anyone seen that documentary already? Anyone here seen it? Robbie Robbins has not seen it yet on Netflix. Songbird says, I have to catch it. Okay, so I'm going to just push to get to the 2-hour mark. I want to bring up just an article on, it's kind of an obscure article. I think some of you are going to find this quite weird, but I wonder if it's going to allow me to log in on this computer. Yeah, so it has. So I just want to talk quickly about two more areas. The one isn't really a case, it's just the decline of X, or the decline of Twitter. Is there anyone here who feels the quality of Twitter, the user experience has really gone downhill? Anyone feel that way, or do you feel the opposite, that it's better than it's ever been? It's a boon to mankind. I just want to refer to this article. It's from the Telegraph, and it's dealing with what's just happened in Brazil. I live in Brazil, where Twitter is banned. Musk would do well to see how quickly life moved on. And so this is a country where Twitter's been banned. Is Twitter going to be banned in other countries, or X.com? And this is from a journalist who's basically saying he had many thousands of followers. It had taken time to build up this following, and then he lost it quite suddenly. And he now doesn't really have that resource available to him to do research. I also use Twitter quite a lot for research. And he says the ban was the latest episode in an ongoing feud between Elon Musk and the Supreme Court of Justice. And so it is like, is X breaking the law? And according to the courts in Brazil, it has. Well, is it breaking the law in any other country? And we've seen there's been certain things happening in the UK where you had the Southport riots. I don't think any accounts were closed as a result of that. And so even Elon Musk himself, I believe, retweeted things suggesting that the perpetrator was an illegal immigrant, and he wasn't, right? So that's the UK. I still can't imagine how there wouldn't be an investigation into that, given what went on. But so far, it doesn't seem like they are. Then there's also what's happened in America, where I don't want to be too explicit about this, but we've had, can you believe it, 2 assassination attempts on President Trump. And then Elon Musk himself said, wow, I'm quite surprised, or I can't remember how he put it. He said something about, it's strange that there hasn't been something similar with Kamala Harris. You can't imagine that statement being allowed to go unprosecuted on Twitter, or even allowing the user to continue posting on Twitter. But of course, that user ended up being Elon Musk himself, the owner. And so, what do you guys think? Do you think X is freeing the law and is allowing more freedom into the world, or do you think it's creating more problems than it's solving? What do you guys think? So I just want to read a couple of comments here. So he said, I didn't think the ban was going to happen. He said he couldn't believe how quickly and easily it did happen. And by the way, I once lived in South Korea, and I was blogging at that stage when blogs were still a thing. And I remember the North Korean leader came to visit South Korea, and suddenly you didn't have access to your blog. And that is how quickly and easily the powers that be can literally flick a switch and you don't have access to certain things online. That's how easy they can do it. And so what does he say? So here's a member of the crowd saying, thank you, Elon Musk. And so here was someone saying, is he actually good for democracy? I'm not sure if that's a reference to a politician in Brazil or somebody else. And so just like that, this journalist tuned into Twitter and he was unable to use it. He says, after nearly 13 years as an active tweeter in Brazil, having amassed some 20,000 followers, the platform was finally gone from my phone. Then he says, I'd noticed a period of notable decline that coincided with Musk buying it. Do you guys feel the same way? Do you feel like Twitter has gone backwards, that Twitter isn't what it once was? Because I think that question opens up a really interesting side issue, which is unlimited freedom of speech good for us? Is unlimited freedom of speech nice? Is unlimited freedom of speech all that it's cracked up to be? And another way of taking that further is if you say, should you be allowed to say, wow, it's strange that that person hasn't been assassinated? Should freedom of speech extend to that point? That should you be allowed to be free to make statements like that? I think the average person would say no. I think the average reasonable, sensible person would say no, right? And so he says, still, despite this unraveling of Twitter, he says, I felt rattled and annoyed because I'd spent years building up a large and active following. But it does make you wonder, is Twitter going to be around? Is X going to be around 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 5 years from now? Is it going to be around or isn't it? So his own wife, also a journalist, said, it'll probably be back at some point. X will be restored in Brazil. And his own wife is a business and economics journalist with her own Twitter following, right? But do you think that it is going to come back in Brazil, or do you think it's going to disappear in other countries as well? And I remember seeing an interview with Elon Musk. Bear in mind, he's a countryman of mine. He's originally from South Africa. I was in Pretoria the other day. He went to Pretoria Boys High. And he was saying, I think Don Lemon, it was a terrible interview from him, but I think Don Lemon asked Elon Musk, what is unacceptable on X? And I think Elon Musk said, well, anything that breaks the law. And I thought that's quite an astute position and quite an astute observation. But then I don't know if Elon Musk is appraised of media law that well, because he's not a journalist. And I think he also gives freedom of expression an almost infinite capacity, which it doesn't have and it shouldn't have. I mean, even as a YouTuber, we aren't allowed to, there's certain boundaries that we aren't allowed to cross and aren't supposed to cross. and there's quite a lot of free speech on YouTube, but there are and should be boundaries, right? So anyway, I just wonder what you thought about this. I thought this was a really interesting article. I don't want to go into too much more detail, trying to jump off this live stream by 2 hours. There is one more case I want to talk about, and it's the Amanda Knox case. And this is also fairly current news. Let's see if I can bring that up. So,
io non sono Foxy Noxy.
So, do you know when this interview was given? When and why Knox gave this interview, right? She gave it in Florence, in Italy, right? And let's just play a little portion from that.
Io sono Amanda Knox e non ho calunniato, non ho ucciso. Sono 17 anni che sono ingiustamente accusata. Ho passato 4 anni in carcere da innocente. 17 anni in tutta la mia vita da adulta.
So, have you ever seen Amanda Knox looking like this in American media? Broken, traumatized, crying, just like the whole thing, like very kind of, she's like not really wearing any makeup, looking really plain, looking really beaten down. Do you kind of remember seeing this version of Amanda Knox? Now, what I think is quite interesting is after Knox was reconvicted, that's what this was all about. She was reconvicted on the whole thing of slander. And this was her saying to the Italian media, it's not fair, it's not true, all of that kind of thing. Now, the thing that's really interesting is, as far as I know, I mean, I did keep my eyes open. Maybe I missed something somewhere, but as far as I know, Knox gave an exclusive interview to Italian media saying, kind of crying and her voice breaking and looking very tearful and saying, it's not true, I wouldn't do this. And yet she didn't give any interviews to any English-speaking media, right? Not to a single American broadcaster that I'm aware of, and also not to any British broadcaster or Australian or anyone else, right? I found that kind of interesting. You've just been reconvicted of something, and your whole persona is that you are a voice for the wrongfully convicted. You know, that she's an activist for that. But you've just been reconvicted on a charge of slandering an innocent person. In other words, accusing someone who didn't commit a crime of committing a crime. It's exactly the thing that she's so upset about. She's been accused of and reconvicted of. And yet she doesn't address it in the American media. She does address it to the Italian media. As far as I know, she did address it on her Labyrinth podcast. So in other words, she dealt with it within her own forum. In other words, where she can cross-examine herself or not be cross-examined, right? I find that kind of quite strange, because if you are innocent and you're going to appeal this and you feel so strongly about the whole don't wrongfully convict someone, doesn't she have a case to present to the American media? And yet she didn't. She hasn't. And then there's this interview that she gave just a few days ago in September. And before I show that to you, this is an article that came out. Amanda Knox speaks out and she says, I'm going to keep fighting this, right? So her response to being reconvicted is, I don't accept it. I'm gonna keep fighting this. And I'm just trying to see where she says it. She says she plans to appeal a reconviction for slander all the way to the Italian Supreme Court. Valentine Bulby, thanks for that. Thanks for joining us. I will fight for truth, she said in an interview with Sky News Italy. But that is an Italian broadcaster. That's where she spoke in Italian, right? So why is she not fighting for the truth in American media? Thanks a lot for that. Thank you. Let me ask that question again. Why is Amanda Knox not fighting? Like she wrote a book, Waiting to be Heard. Why is she not trying to be heard, waiting to be heard, fighting to be heard? Why is she not fighting for the truth in the American media? I mean, she's always done it in the past. And bear in mind, a series is coming out about Amanda Knox, like a dramatization of Amanda Knox's journey. That's coming out on Hulu, I think, this year, right? That's like in the offing. Grace Van Patten to play Amanda Knox in Hulu limited series. That came out in June, right? You guys know about this? So let me ask the question again. Why is Amanda Knox not fighting for the truth that she didn't slander anyone in the American media, but she's just been reconvicted of it? So at this point in the Italian legal narrative, Knox is convicted of slander, right? And so Amanda Knox has just given an interview. It aired a couple of days ago, and here it is.
And you've had to have that, obviously throughout the situations you've been in, but especially lately with the reconviction, the slander case. And I wonder how that felt to when you've moved on from something and distanced yourself from it, and you're living in Washington with your husband and kids, to get pulled back into this chapter of your life. How have you dealt with that?
I think that what I would say is I'm never far from this tragedy and this experience, again, because it was so public, so it became so prominent in my life. I couldn't go around, like, I couldn't interact with the world without.
Okay, so there are 2 or 3 questions I've got around this interview. Number one is, does nobody care? I mean, it's only been viewed 600 views from 4 days ago. So no one really seems to have paid much attention to this interview, right? The other thing that's kind of interesting is that Knox, I don't think she mentions anywhere in this interview. She certainly doesn't bring up the reconviction. I haven't listened to every single minute of it, but as far as I can see, she doesn't bring it up. And you would imagine that would be what she wants to talk about. She also doesn't mention an appeal. That's not mentioned at all. And as far as I know, no appeal has been lodged. Maybe, not sure what the time frame is that she's allowed to do that. But certainly at this point, and all of this happened, if you think about the media narrative going into this, she was quite vocal. The media narrative on the other side of it, having been reconvicted, is totally different. Not very vocal at all. And I can tell you now, if Amanda Knox had been acquitted, that would be very vocally part of what she would be saying here about that. And they try to convict me for slander, and I beat that charge as well, right? What's interesting in this video is how few people have watched it, just 600 views. And when she's asked by the interviewer, and I found this one of the most softball interviews I've ever seen of Amanda Knox. I don't think Meredith Kurtz's name is ever mentioned in this interview. Like I say, I didn't listen to all 24 minutes. I listened to pieces of it. But nowhere does she mention an appeal. She doesn't really bring up the reconviction herself. And you would think if you've just been convicted or reconvicted, and it's all about wrongful conviction, aren't you going to be bringing that up? Isn't that going to be central to your story? Isn't that going to be the main thrust of what you want to be dealing with and what you're thinking about and what you're going to be doing? And yet it's not. And so how does that make you think about this stage of the Amanda Knox story? I don't know. I find it kind of bizarre. I definitely find it kind of bizarre. You know, you can watch the whole thing here. If you guys want me to deal with it in more detail, I guess I can. Let's listen to a little bit more. I'm just going to go back to where it's mentioned to her and how she responds. Does she really deal with it?
And distance yourself from it. And you're living in Washington with your husband and kids. To get theme is about resilience. And you've had to have that, obviously throughout the situations you've been in, but especially lately with the reconviction, the slander case. And I wonder how that felt to when you've moved on from something and distanced yourself from it, and you're living in Washington with your husband and kids, to get pulled back into this chapter of your life. How have you dealt with that?
I think that what I would say is I'm never far from this track.
So I'm going to play a little bit more from that, but I would think, you know, if someone said you've been pulled back into this, you've been reconvicted, how are you dealing with it? I think the first thing I would say is I'm appealing it. I don't accept it. I'm challenging the result in court. Does she say that? I mean, if that is what you want to do, if that is what you're going to do, and isn't that what she said she's going to do, right? I mean, here it is. Here it is in this article. I'm going to keep fighting this, right? And there is the word appeal somewhere here. She plans to appeal a reconviction. And that was in June, right? So you'd think when she gets her first opportunity to speak to an American journalist, she'd be talking about this and talking about, I'm going to appeal, I'm going to be fighting this. Does she? Does she?
To get pulled back into this chapter of your life, how have you dealt with that?
I think that what I would say is I'm never far from this tragedy and this experience. Again, because it was so public, so it became so prominent in my life. I couldn't go around, like, I couldn't interact with the world without the world having that sort of lens through which to view me and interact with me. So I've always had that since I came home. And I think instead, what I've learned is that instead of feeling like I have to run away from the worst experience of my life, I can look at it directly in the face. And first of all, it becomes a little less scary when you finally look at something directly in the face, but also you find ways of turning it around and making it feel like it's not a burden, but an opportunity.
So really wise words from Amanda Knox, you know, how you deal with things, you need to face it. So is Amanda Knox going to face her reconviction? I don't know, because she doesn't answer the question. But if you take her own words where she says, I've learned to deal with things, don't run away from them. Well, she didn't really tell the American media what she felt after being reconvicted. Did she? Like, immediately after she was reconvicted, she returned to America. Did she tell the media what was going on? Did she sort of face what was going on? And is this appeal happening? I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is to that. I'm just saying I find it a little curious, right? It's a little curious. The thing that I find really ironic is she's just been reconvicted of slander, and here she's being interviewed about what a activist she is for the wrongfully convicted. And it seems to me like the interviewer doesn't see is totally tone deaf to what she's talking about. I don't know. I find that like quite strange. But anyway, so I just wanted to put that onto your radar. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Sweet and Salty says, I agree, it's all odd. Yeah, I mean, do me a favor, watch this interview and let me know if Meredith's name is ever mentioned in this interview. Okay. Do you have anything else to share with you guys? I think the only thing I've really got to say that I want to kind of get off my chest a little is the last video I put up on the Ramsey case is, I think, some of the best evidence that there is, some of the best research that I think there is on the Ramsey case. And I remember when my co-author Lisa Wilson and myself were actively writing books, and we were really on the ball. You know, we were like making all sorts of discoveries and so on. And I remember at that time, HLN contacted us and basically just said, okay, what is your smoking gun, right? And I think that is, in a nutshell, what a lot of people expect and want, right? They want a smoking gun. They want, even in the Gregg case, you don't actually have a smoking gun. Like, you literally can't see the gun smoking just after she's fired it, because she goes around the corner. And I just think we need to stop expecting things to be on a silver platter that are just absolutely evident. The John Benet Ramsey case isn't as complicated as a lot of people think, but it's also not absolutely black and white, absolutely simple with no nuance. No unsolved case, and certainly no case that's absolutely clear and simple, doesn't have any subtlety, right? And I think what's happening so much in true crime, I mentioned this at the beginning, is that people are being psychologically brainwashed into thinking that things are absolutely clear. Things are shocking, and it's a bombshell, and it is, what's the word? You know, like breaking news, something incredibly obvious has just happened and it's crystal clear. Life's just not like that. Life is a bit more complicated. Life is a bit more nuanced. Life is a bit more subtle. Good people do bad things. Some bad people do good things as well. Evidence is not total. There's certain things in evidence that takes you in a certain direction, but there are certain things that seem obvious that just aren't that way, right? Anyway, my point is, I was quite shocked. I mean, that is the right word. I was quite shocked after putting up the last video on the John Benet Ramsey case, which I think has got some of the best research in it, that people weren't really even interested in it. People didn't even say, wow, this changes so much. Wow, this is incredible. Wow, I didn't know this. Wow, this is taking my knowledge base substantially forward. Wow, this thing that I've been looking at over and over again, I never really knew about this aspect to it, right? It's really discouraging that people are entertained by true crime rather than informed by true crime. People are entertained and titillated by true crime rather than appraised of facts and evidence in what I believe should be a proper way. And if you want to assess, like, how do I approach true crime? Like, what is my approach? And I'm sure if there are a couple of other YouTubers watching, they would say, I'd like to hear this because my channel is twice as big as yours, or you may be authentic, but you are so boring. Like, you don't have any, you're not charming, you lack a bedside manner, this, that, and the next thing. And I would say those things are maybe all true. But what I would also say is how I approach true crime is like a lawyer, is where you're trying to present a case with facts and evidence and logic and critical thinking. And my criticism of these other channels that are larger and more popular and more fun and more interesting and more engaging and all those things is that they are all of those things. But how much of it is educating you on the evidence and on the facts, right? And sometimes the facts aren't fun. Sometimes the facts take you away from the thing where you say, no, it's not foul play, but I want to believe it's foul play. That would have been so exciting. That would be a bombshell. That's not foul play. And beware of being interested in true crime just to get a vicarious sense of, I'm good, someone else is evil. I'm right, someone else is wrong. Someone else is to blame, someone else is guilty, etc., etc., etc. Because in a world like that, you don't really strengthen yourself, you actually weaken yourself. What I'm trying to do with my subscribers and with my channel is I'm trying to, through true crime cases, it's just a vehicle. The idea isn't to be entertaining. The idea is to, in a way, edify you and teach you critical thinking, teach you to be a better thinker, teach you to be a better navigator and investigator of your world, of your reality, and of reality, right? It's not to manipulate you into dealing with anxiety and if you suspect that something happened in a certain case, telling you what you want to hear. It's actually trying to guide you into a way that you are better able to navigate your own life by appreciating subtlety. And I'm sure in your own life you would say, I've got a relationship with my father. I've got a relationship with my mother, and it's not black and white. It sometimes goes in this trajectory, but sometimes there are struggles. Sometimes there are difficulties. I've got relationships with my children, and sometimes there are areas where we misunderstand one another. And sometimes there are areas that I just don't understand, or whatever it is. And so in the same way that you look at a criminal or a witness, and you're trying to assess their credibility, get away from constantly, they are guilty, 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 they committed the crime, whatever. Get away from that and try and get into the place where you say, what actually happened here? I'm trying to understand what happened without judgment. And you can judge everything at the end of collecting that evidence. Now, start off with this. Start off with the scout mindset, where you curious and you getting information about the world, and reserve that judgment for the end when you've collated all the evidence. Otherwise, you're like a jury that's made up its mind before the case is led, and then you simply just say what you thought to begin with. Well, then you're not a juror, then you're a judge, and you're a judge in spite of the evidence. And a judge in spite of the evidence isn't an effective organism. Now, if you are in your life dealing with issues, health, wealth, people around you, right? And everything's a foregone conclusion to you. How are you going to improve your life by adapting to new knowledge and new information and change? How are you going to do that if everything's already locked in, carved in stone, and it's always someone else is to blame? Whereas if you understand patterns and you can recognize patterns and dynamics and your part that you play in those, either in aggravating some of those patterns or in being part of the solution, then you can actually be an asset to your community and to your country and to some extent on a massive scale to others around you. I really feel quite strongly about this, that a lot of social media is teaching very reptilian thinking, off on black, white, angry, fearful, blame, this, whatever. And there's so little subtlety in that. There's so little putting yourself in that person's shoes, trying to understand where the perpetrator is coming from, because we are all human beings in a way, and not to sympathize with them, but just to understand reality. Isn't that why we're here, to understand reality? Or are we here to assuage our own guilt, or to get a sense of power by laughing at the misfortunes of others, right? I would like to think we're better than that we're here to understand reality where the media can't tell us what it is. The actual reality in the Nicola Bulley case, is it this, that, or something else? Well, why is it that so few are able to figure out there's something else? And there's so many cases like that. What really happened in the Madeleine McCann case? Or the media think they know what the answer is, and they think it's Christian Brookner. It's not the answer. And a lot of people follow that. It's not the answer. And so if you can't figure out what really happened with Nicola Bulley or Madeleine McCann or John Benet Ramsey or Carly Gregg, who was on video, or Suzanne Morphew, where the suspect is allowed to prosecute his prosecutors, then what hope is there for the world where serious things are starting to happen, but you can't actually tell what reality is, but we're going to choose the obvious reality, right? Think about big issues of our time right now, where if we are wrong about this, we're going to pay an incredibly high price. And I'm talking about climate change. If we're wrong about climate change, collectively, we are all going to pay a really high price. And I don't know, I think like with climate change, it's the same thing. Show me the smoking gun with climate change. Okay, no, but that's someone was saying, if you say Hurricane Helene is a smoking gun, no, that's just part of the hurricane season. Okay, so maybe it's kind of more subtle. But how unsubtle does something need to be before you recognize it as reality, right? And unfortunately, I think social media is turning us into tribes, and the one tribe has got to be as unsubtle as possible about their reality, and the other tribe is becoming as unsubtle as possible about their reality. It's kind of like the high school thing where you say, my dad's stronger than yours. No, my dad's stronger. It's so unsubtle. It's so vulgar. It's so it's such a weak, borrowed sense of strength, and it's so artificial. It's not how life is. Think about aging, how subtle that is. You don't realize that you've aged until you have this affliction, or your eyesight deteriorates, or that all of it is happening in subtle degrees. Crime tends to propagate through various levels of subtlety. Someone who decides to become a criminal like Scott Peterson, it's through these very subtle layers, one over the other. The golden child, the affair, narcissism, struggling with money, and all of these are ultimately very unsubtle, but it starts off in a subtle snake that starts snaking around one's psychology. And if you can't recognize that in a criminal that's a high-profile case, can you recognize it in yourself? Can you recognize deteriorations and escalations in your own psychology? Because if you can, that's good for you. That means you can be in a situation and say, I'm self-aware enough to say, this isn't good for me. Maybe I can do something about it. Maybe I can be not my worst enemy, my best friend. Maybe I can also recognize someone next to me, a stranger or someone close to me, and say, I can see that this is happening. Let's do something about it. And also in terms of our world. And that is the gift, I think, of authenticity, where you say, what is authentic? It's what's real. It's what's really real. And I don't know, I feel like we starting to live in a society where people actually don't care what's real anymore, where people don't care what's authentic, rather give me the other version. It's like that guy in the Matrix who says, send me back to the Matrix. I want to eat a nice steak because ignorance is bliss. Anyway, let's have a look at your comments, and then I'm going to hop off. Valentine says the TikTok mentality of mindless scrolling is all too pervasive. So much of how people are manipulated today is through fear. So much of true crime is you being shocked to believe something scary that's just not true. The perpetrator in the Madeleine McCann case is this child predator monster. Well, or it's something not as explicit as that? Well, which one do you want to believe? Which one do people gravitate towards? Well, the answer is predictable. The answer is definitely predictable. Let's just go through a couple of your other comments. Nancy says, I'm surrounded in a neighborhood by people who ignore evidence. That's good to hear. I hope I'm improving your life, not the opposite. Good point from Chelsea. Do your own research. Practice your own critical thinking, right? Practice your own critical thinking. In a given situation, ask yourself, what am I not thinking about here? What am I not realizing? What have I forgotten? What patterns are already in place? Not what don't I know? What do I know? What pattern has already been laid down? What evidence is already clear that I should be paying attention to? Just a kind of a reminder, what is critical thinking? It means you question, analyze, interpret, evaluate. You do it. You don't have someone else do it for you. You do it. And you make a judgment about what you read, hear, say, or write. But I want to add another element to it. You know, we keep talking about analysis. Well, guess what word you can also take out of analysis? If you're doing analysis all the time, guess what you're doing? Guess what it becomes? Right? And analysis is an important part of critical thinking, but I would argue that there's a more important part that comes at the end of it. Anyone got an idea of what I'm driving at?
Synthesis.
Right? At the end of analysis, there needs to be synthesis. And what synthesis is, can you guys read that?
Synthesis.
It is combining components, putting together a scenario, compiling, integrating, taking all the fragments, getting all the evidence and bringing it together into a synthesis where you say, this is this thing where they try to break apart all the evidence, they try to cover it up, they try to distort the original so that you couldn't see it, so that your vision of reality was broken and fragmented. It is being done deliberately. It's not enough at the end of the day to see, yes, I found that fragment. My analysis has identified that pattern over there. It's not enough to do that. You've got to take all of those things at the end of the day and bring it together and say, this is the original connected whole. And I recognize what happened here in terms of seeing the woods for the trees. I recognize I'm not getting so caught up in this one case that, oh, I know what happened in this case. That person committed the crime. No, that's not really the lesson to learn. This is how you were deceived. That's the lesson. This is how you were manipulated. This is the process of how that process takes place. In other words, learn to think about thinking. Learn to think about how people are manipulated. Learn to think why people are manipulated. Learn to see and recognize how that happens. And then take that knowledge into the next case and get better and better at it. And then take that knowledge into your own life and say, what system is playing out in my life? What do I need to synthesize out of all of these parts of my life where I'm going to take my life forward and I'm going to become whole again? Or do you want to spend your whole life being a victim, being broken, blaming other people, sort of voyeuristically looking at wounded, broken lives and guilty people and kind of bad people? At what point do you take the analysis and say, I'm going to do something good with the fact that I'm alive, I'm innocent, I've got the opportunity to live my life, I can do something? Well, are you going to? Right? So the same thing that I'm trying to inculcate with you guys, where I say, recognize patterns, recognize what is taking place, but then also come away from that analysis and try and see the overall picture. Do the same with your own life. So if you can practice that in a true crime case where you say, okay, at the end of the day, this is what was actually taking place here. This was how this person's life slipped away. This was the moment things went wrong. This is how they could have turned things around. If you can think in those global ways, you can think about your life in the same way, in a way that's integrated, not fragmented, in a way that's ultimately building something that's going to become whole again, and it's giving you agency and responsibility, right? Look at what synthesis is.
Synthesis.
Combination, union, amalgam, blend, mixture, compound, fusion, unification, marrying, reconciliation. Think about in a court case, you have one side presenting evidence, another side presenting evidence, and at the end of the day, the jury have got to reconcile all of this information, come up with an assessment. You need to do the same with your life and with situations that you're in. Not just spend the whole time, that person's to blame, oh, a bombshell, look at that. Don't be preoccupied with the fragments. Try and also remember to bring those fragments together into something that is ultimately edifying and positive and self-affirming, and where it takes us to a better place. Otherwise, you're looking into a dark hole, and the longer you look, eventually that darkness is going to consume you. It's going to that your life, your world, your experience is going to be darkness. The reason you want to go into the darkness is to understand how to get back to the light, right? You are not in the darkness for its own sake. You're in the darkness to learn to navigate back to the light, so you can be reconciled with the light and with life and with with an authentic experience of being alive. It's to come alive again, not to be so fixated with death that that's all you do, because that is, look at the first part of that word. Okay. I didn't mean to go off on such a tangent. It's obviously been building up in me, but there it is. Safety release. There we go. Holistic approach. But really what I'm trying to get at is I'm so concerned at how thinking is devolving in the people I see around me. People who don't think, algorithms think for them. They can't think critically. They've never learned to think critically. How do you get someone to start thinking critically when it's like in the Matrix where Neo says, how come I can't see? And Morphew says, because you've never used your eyes. How do you get someone to see for the first time when they've just never tried? When they're just used to being told what to think, and they think along paths of least resistance. Critical thinking is thinking about things in ways you perhaps don't want to, ways that are going to make you uncomfortable. But it's also has a really positive result where you find out what's really going on. And you'll realize that not a lot of people do know what's really going on. Anyway, ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance is darkness. And how does that saying go? There's nothing in the desert and no man needs nothing. True crime is in a way a desert of destruction and death and deceit and all those things, right? You've got to come out of that desert to come alive again, right? And so, understanding where the desert is and what's going on in the desert is good, but you need to come out of the desert as well. And that's what I want to kind of encourage my followers to do as well. Like, arm yourself with self-awareness. Be aware of things that aren't pleasant to think about, but what's more unpleasant is to be deceived and then wake up one day and the world is changed around you, and you are totally what's the word? You're totally vulnerable to kind of the unknown, because it's suddenly reality falls on you like a pile of bricks, right? But if you know what reality is, you know how to fit into reality, you know how to deal with reality. Otherwise, you are kind of at the mercy of kind of randomness. Some of the stuff you've got a handle on, and some of the stuff you don't. I mean, think about it in a very simple way. An animal in the wilderness. Can you see that a lion is stalking you? Can you see that you're in an area and the lion's got a strategy? And if you don't figure things out soon, you're going to be in real peril, right? In other words, it's not just knowing your situation, it's knowing your situation relative to what else is going on around you. That's reality, right? And if you don't understand reality, you can't act in a authoritative way on reality. What happens all the time is reality is acting on you. You're just reacting to reality. You're not acting on reality. You're not shaping reality because you understand reality. And I think that's, in a way, the difference between really powerful and wealthy and also intelligent people is they don't just react to reality all the time. They create reality. And I think you can only create reality if you understand it. Like if you understand it in terms of processes and dynamics and flows, if you know what I'm saying. If you understand your own psychology, you understand what your weaknesses are, you understand how other people think, and you don't necessarily want to just cynically manipulate people. You also want people to bring the best out of themselves as well. Anyway, okay, I need to end this live. I'll just look at a last couple of your comments. Agenda says perceptions and self-awareness. What are you guys reading? What does Robbie Robbins say she's reading? The Scout Mindset. Yeah, I do highly recommend this book if you want to get at what I'm talking about. So the blurb is why some people see things clearly and others don't. And one of the first prerequisites to that is keeping an open mind, right? Keeping an open mind means you are not having a soldier mindset where you've already got your fortress and you're defending everything that you feel. You are willing to allow the information to speak for itself. It's being curious as opposed to being like a cup that's already full. You can't put anything in it. It's kind of acknowledging what we don't know. So I just want to deal with this point. Silent Murmur says there are plenty of wealthy people that produce garbage. Let me ask you a question. If you had a choice, and let's assume that you're heterosexual and you are wanting to get married, and I know this is it's putting it in very stark terms, but if you had a choice, and your choice was to marry a rich partner or a poor partner, which one would you choose? And you might say, yeah, I mean, a rich person isn't necessarily moral, and that's true. And a rich person isn't necessarily a good person, and that's true. And a rich person, but one thing that I think you can acknowledge is a poor person has not yet proved themselves, or probably has not yet proved themselves. And what I mean by that is, do they understand the world? Do they? And although money is just one measure, it is in a way a good measure that shows, is someone capable of working hard? Is someone capable of saving? Is someone capable of making intelligent decisions? Is someone capable of exerting power over other people? maybe in a good way, maybe not. But a poor person is often powerless, and they often have other problems. They are often addicted. They often can't get over their traumas. They are often blaming everybody else. They don't want to do anything to improve their situation because of some problem. And so who would you rather be with? Someone who has agency or somebody who doesn't? And I must say, I've watched enough episodes of Judge Judy to see this pattern where so many times the guilty person, the perpetrator, is an unemployed male. He doesn't have a job and is unemployed. That seems to be like the root of all evil, right? But what I'm trying to say is that I think I've actually said enough. I don't really need to say too much more. That's a good point. I do think wealth within tends to manifest as wealth without. I mean, what I mean by that is if you've got something meaningful inside and you find a way to manifest it outside, it might be books, it might be your charisma, it might be your love of the arts, it might be your love of science or math or whatever it is, something that's inside, but you've got to find a way to manifest it, to synthesize it. You know, you feel it, you sense it, it is there, but have you found a path to bring it about? And that is a problem and a challenge we all have. There's something I want to be, there's something I want to do, but the world also needs to shake your hand and say, okay, I'm going to let you do this. Or if you do it, I'm going to accept what you're doing, right? And that is the problem of synthesis. How do you do that? Timmy says, another way to happiness and authenticity is just taking a dog for a walk. That's also true, Timmy. It's true, hey. Shame, I didn't even summon him. He just came here out of his own. Like, your voice is getting a little high pitched. I'm kind of worried. I'm gonna be your comfort animal. Your what do they call them in America? If you take them on a plane, what are they called? Stress. It's my stress animal, or something like that. Anyway. Okay, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. I just want to thank everyone for the super chats. Robbie Robin, Long Island Hillbilly, Mandy, Kimchi has been a member, Robbie Robin as well. Okay, thanks a lot to you guys. The format of the next live, the next crime news update, I really want to stick to under 1 hour. So I really don't want to go down the rabbit holes. I really want to just appraise you guys of the news for like 10 minutes at a time. The Kohberger thing was just quite complicated, you know, like to communicate that. Nicola Bulley, I think, deserved a little bit of additional looking at. So yeah, that's why this one was fairly long. The next one, I just want to keep all of them going forward like under an hour or less. An hour or less. What else do I need to tell you? Don't forget to watch Love on the Run, the Netflix documentary on Vicky White. And as I say, I've got a playlist on that if you want to get any additional details. I'm going to try and watch the Nicola Bulley documentary on Thursday. I hope you guys watch it, especially those of you in the UK. And then, if at all possible, I'll do a review of it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch it in South Africa, but if I can, I will, and I will review it. So look out for that. Okay, so from Timmy and me, take care, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.